Hello, perceptive Libra. Sometimes everything around you can appear peaceful, while something inside you knows that keeping it that way has required more effort than anyone realizes. You may have been carrying responsibilities, expectations, or emotions simply because you are good at noticing what other people need. Ask yourself something simple but revealing. Is this truly mine to hold, or have I become so accustomed to keeping everyone steady that I have forgotten to notice what is weighing on me? That distinction can create room for possibilities you might otherwise overlook. An idea, project, conversation, or unfamiliar direction may catch your attention, and your first instinct could be to consider every possible consequence before admitting that part of you is genuinely interested. Your ability to see several sides is one of your strengths, Libra, but perspective becomes exhausting when every viewpoint receives a vote except your own. Before asking how everyone else might respond, consider whether the choice in front of you reflects something you actually value. This is where your instinct for balance becomes more useful, when it includes both intuition and reason. You do not have to choose between what you feel and what makes practical sense. Often the clearest path appears when those two parts of you are finally allowed to speak to each other. Pay attention to ordinary exchanges, unexpected observations, or ideas that make you reconsider something familiar. A casual conversation or something you happen to read may not be a cosmic instruction, but it can reveal a thought that was already quietly forming beneath the surface. Stay receptive without abandoning your judgment. A possibility becomes meaningful when you can give it structure, understand what it requires, and decide whether the exchange is sustainable for you. This applies to money and work, but also to your time, affection, attention, and emotional labor, the less visible things you may give away before realizing how much they cost. Venus, your ruling planet, offers a useful symbolic lens here. What deserves your care because it genuinely nourishes your values? And what are you maintaining mainly because disappointing someone feels uncomfortable? If anxiety appears around love, finances, change, or an important decision, do not immediately assume that discomfort means you are moving in the wrong direction. Fear sometimes warns you about something real, but it can also repeat the language of an older experience when unfamiliar territory begins to open. Ask yourself whether the concern belongs to what is actually happening, or whether yesterday's disappointments are quietly writing the script. And ask one more difficult question. Have you been calling something careful consideration when, underneath all that weighing and measuring, you already know what you want? Recognizing the pattern gives you more freedom in how you respond to it. Once you understand why a choice unsettles you, you no longer have to automatically repeat the reaction that once kept you safe. Perfectionism can work the same way, especially when you are trying to find a solution that keeps every person comfortable and every relationship undisturbed. You are allowed to move without creating a flawless outcome, and you are allowed to take one thoughtful step before the entire road becomes visible. Give your attention to what is actually within reach. Progress does not need to arrive dramatically to matter, and a small boundary, completed task, honest answer, or moment of self-respect can change the emotional direction of something much larger. Treating yourself with compassion does not mean ignoring responsibility. It helps you distinguish genuine responsibility from the habit of taking ownership of everyone else's comfort. That distinction can feel like opening a window in the room where the air has been still for too long. Your sensitivity to atmosphere also deserves a more discerning role. If a conversation repeatedly leaves you diminished, an invitation asks you to compromise something important, or a direction looks appealing but feels strangely misaligned, give yourself permission to examine that response before saying yes. Not every opportunity belongs to you, and declining one does not make you unkind or ungrateful. Sometimes balance returns because you stop adding more weight to the scale and finally set down what was never yours to carry. At the same time, discernment does not require you to close yourself off. Remain available to relationships where care moves in both directions, ideas that awaken genuine curiosity, and possibilities that let you participate without disappearing inside another person's expectations. Change can begin quietly through a clearer boundary, a creative impulse you finally respect, or a conversation in which you stop editing your truth before anyone else can hear it. What appears small from the outside may reveal how much energy you once spent maintaining arrangements that looked peaceful but never truly felt balanced. Libra, the deeper invitation is not to become colder, louder, or less considerate. It is to let your instinct for harmony grow into something more honest, where peace does not depend on your silence and connection does not require you to continually bargain away parts of yourself. Use this reflection only where it genuinely speaks to your circumstances, and leave aside anything that does not belong to your story. When the voices around you become quieter, notice what remains within you and whether the peace you are protecting is something you truly feel or something you have been working too hard to maintain. If you want a color to carry through this part of the reading, ruby can remain as a symbolic accent rather than a promise of luck. A ruby-colored scarf, piece of jewelry, or small detail can represent warmth, confidence, and the willingness to become more visible without performing for anyone. Choose the shade because it feels alive against your skin and reflects something you want to embody, not because a color can guarantee an outcome. For Venus-ruled Libra, beauty becomes most meaningful when it expresses value rather than hiding what you truly feel. That same Venusian symbolism can be carried into creativity. Music, singing, painting, movement, theater, sculpture, or any form that gives your inner world somewhere tangible to go may help you hear yourself differently. Sharing those interests with people who genuinely care about them can also widen your perspective, because creativity often changes when it moves from a private room into a living conversation. The important thing is not proving that you are talented enough. It is allowing curiosity to lead without immediately measuring how your expression will be received. And beneath that creative opening, Libra, there is a quieter emotional weight. You may recognize the exhaustion of relationship that required constant adjustment, like trying to climb loose sand while pretending the ground beneath you was stable. The deepest hurt may not have come from obvious betrayal, but from absence. The gradual experience of speaking without feeling heard, giving without feeling met, or remaining beside someone while becoming increasingly invisible. Eventually, silence itself can become heavier than whatever truth it was meant to protect. Something changes when you stop confusing silence with harmony. Perhaps you have begun acknowledging what you once softened, edited, or kept behind your teeth because you feared that honesty would disturb the relationship. That recognition does not automatically decide what happens between you and another person, but it does return something important to your hands: the right to participate in your own life without waiting for permission. This is where the tarot sequence becomes especially revealing. Beginning with the Empress. The Empress does not simply say that you are becoming more attractive or that everyone will notice you. She asks what happens when you begin giving your own growth, the same patient attention you have so often given other people. Her garden grows because it is tended with care, not because it begs to be admired, and that distinction matters for you. Your magnetism becomes less about being chosen and more about becoming selective about what deserves your affection, creativity, energy, and continued investment. Then comes the Eight of Swords, and its message reaches directly into Libra's habit of seeing every possible side. Perspective is valuable until every perspective is allowed to overrule your own needs. You may have believed that success required endless sacrifice, or that love meant accommodating one compromise after another, until you could barely identify where your boundaries had once been. The blindfold in this card can symbolize the moment you realize that some limitations survive because they have become familiar, not because they are permanent. The Knight of Wands changes the rhythm. After so much weighing, analyzing, and anticipating other people's reactions, this fiery figure introduces movement and asks what a decision looks like once you stop reopening it, simply because someone else is uncomfortable with your answer. This does not mean rushing forward recklessly or proving anything to someone from your past. It means discovering that momentum can come from conviction rather than urgency, and that you do not need an audience for your movement to be real. The Lovers deepens that lesson because this card is not only about romance, it is also about choice, values, and the quality of an exchange. In relationships, the more useful question is not whether someone new or familiar will arrive and recognize your transformation, Ask whether the connection allows two people to remain honest without one person repeatedly shrinking to preserve the appearance of harmony. Affection matters, but reciprocity matters too, and chemistry cannot indefinitely compensate for a relationship in which only one person keeps adjusting the scales. The sun brings illumination rather than a guaranteed victory. It suggests the kind of clarity that appears when you no longer need to dim your needs in order to keep another person comfortable. You may begin seeing collaboration differently, noticing who communicates openly, who respects boundaries, and where warmth can exist without emotional guessing games. Confidence in this sense is quieter than performance. It is the relief of standing in your own life without constantly checking whether everyone approves of the space you occupy. Your physical well-being deserves the same grounded attention. Rather than treating astrology as medical instruction, use this part of the reading as a reminder to notice the habits that support or drain your body. Rest, nutrition, movement, and sensible screen habits can all be worth reviewing according to your individual needs. If you have persistent symptoms, concerns about your eyes, or questions about supplements, a qualified healthcare professional can give you guidance based on your actual health rather than a generalized reading. In your professional life, Libra's relationship with fairness becomes especially relevant. Agreements work best when expectations are clear on both sides, so pay attention to whether responsibilities, credit, deadlines, and promises are being shared as fairly as they appear to be. There is no need to assume that someone is secretly working against you, but neither do you have to ignore inconsistencies simply to avoid tension. Clear communication, appropriate documentation, and firm boundaries can protect cooperation without turning ordinary uncertainty into suspicion. Finances bring the same question of value into another form. An opportunity, conversation, or idea may invite you to reconsider how you use money, but the important shift is not about chasing abundance or trusting instinct more than evidence. It is about recognizing when your intuition is pointing towards something worth examining, then giving that feeling practical structure through numbers, research, and realistic consequences. Your inner response can begin the conversation, Libra, while careful judgment helps you decide what truly deserves your resources. There is a meaningful difference between taking a thoughtful risk and acting simply because you are restless for something to change. For Libra, discernment becomes especially important here because your ability to weigh possibilities can either sharpen a decision or keep you circling it long after you have gathered enough information. The goal is not endless caution, but movement supported by both evidence and self-trust. When those two work together, you can make room for possibility without handing your judgment over to impulse. Your relationship with wealth may also be asking for a quieter kind of examination. Perhaps you have learned to associate financial progress with exhaustion, constant compromise, or the belief that something valuable must always cost you more than you comfortably have to give. A healthier definition of prosperity leaves room for sustainable effort, fair exchange, and work that does not repeatedly drain the person doing it. That shift can influence not only how you earn and spend, but also which collaborations, commitments, and opportunities you consider worthy of your investment. Look closely at the smaller exchanges as well. Forgotten subscriptions, habitual spending, unnecessary obligations, or commitments that consume disproportionate amounts of time can quietly create pressure before they become obvious problems. The same principle applies to your energy. Something can appear inexpensive financially while costing far more in attention, resentment, or emotional labor. Reviewing where your resources actually go can show you what still supports your priorities and what you may simply be maintaining out of habit. Opportunity then becomes less about luck arriving at exactly the right moment and more about your ability to recognize what deserves further investigation. Something you once dismissed may look different when viewed without the shadow of an earlier disappointment. Just as a closed door can sometimes turn out to be a door you never actually tried to open. Stay hopeful without assuming that every possibility is meant for you. Grounded optimism gives curiosity enough room to breathe while still asking practical questions about consequences, sustainability, and value. In love, that same balance becomes deeply personal. A strong relationship does not require two people to dissolve into one identity in order to survive difficulty. It asks whether both people can remain present, accountable, and willing to work with what is real. Libra can be remarkably skilled at compromise, but compromise loses its meaning when the same person is always bending. The deeper question is whether affection and effort move in both directions, allowing closeness without asking either person to disappear. Questions about pregnancy, contraception, or reproductive health belong to personal choice and reliable medical guidance, rather than astrological prediction. Symbolically, however, themes of creation can still speak to what you are nurturing together: a relationship, shared plan, home, creative endeavor, or vision that requires mutual responsibility to grow. What matters is conscious participation rather than assuming that fate has already decided the outcome. Intimacy becomes more meaningful when important choices can be discussed openly instead of being handed over to signs or expectations. If you are single, self-discovery does not have to function as a waiting room for romance. New environments, unfamiliar interests, and experiences outside your usual patterns can show you parts of yourself that are difficult to meet when life remains carefully arranged around what you already know. Other people may become part of that exploration, but the deeper value lies in noticing who you are when you are not adapting yourself to maintain a particular connection. That awareness can quietly reshape what you will accept when closeness enters the picture. Family relationships bring this theme into older territory. Certain patterns can survive for years because everyone has learned which subjects to avoid, which roles to perform, and which feelings are easier to leave unnamed. A meaningful conversation may help you understand how those patterns developed and what place you have occupied within them, without requiring you to turn that understanding into blame. Family history becomes useful when it gives you context without becoming a script you feel obligated to repeat. Approach difficult exchanges with curiosity where curiosity is possible. You may discover that some tension comes from people defending old roles rather than intentionally trying to hurt one another, while other situations may reveal boundaries that genuinely need strengthening. At the same time, notice the quieter relationships that have offered consistency without demanding constant recognition. Telling someone that their steady presence matters can deepen a bond in ways that dramatic gestures sometimes cannot. Distance can take many forms, and it is not always measured in miles. Two people can share the same room while avoiding what matters, just as people living far apart can remain emotionally close through sincere attention. A simple message or honest acknowledgement may create an opening, but authenticity matters more than forcing reconciliation for the sake of appearances. Connection is strongest when contact is chosen with awareness, rather than performed because everyone expects the family to look harmonious. This is especially important for you, Libra, because preserving peace can become such a practiced skill that you may not immediately notice when peace has turned into self-silencing. A household can appear calm simply because everyone has learned not to touch the subjects carrying the most emotional weight. Real harmony has enough room for respectful disagreement, disappointment, and truth. You do not have to become confrontational. You may simply need to become more present in conversations where you once edited yourself before speaking. Home, in that sense, is not merely the place where conflict disappears. It can become the place where you are increasingly able to show up without constantly adjusting your shape to fit everyone else's expectations. Notice which environments expand your energy and which consistently leave you depleted, because that contrast can offer useful information about your boundaries. Instead of forcing yourself to operate at one constant pace, allow your attention to follow what genuinely deserves it. Reliability also has a place in this story, though not as a promise that one perfectly executed action will suddenly change your reputation. Keeping commitments, respecting other people's time, preparing thoughtfully, and communicating when circumstances change are practical ways of bringing Libra's sense of fairness into everyday behavior. Consistency can create trust because it allows other people to understand what they can reasonably expect from you. Just remember that responsibility does not mean saying yes to every request placed in front of you. And if you feel a powerful urge to change several areas of your life at once, examine what is underneath that urgency before acting on it. Sometimes transformation is necessary, Sometimes the desire to rearrange everything is an attempt to escape one uncomfortable truth that has not yet been faced directly. You do not need to overturn the entire room because one piece no longer belongs where it was. Give yourself enough quiet to recognize what genuinely needs movement, what needs a boundary, and what may simply need to be seen more clearly. Practical awareness matters just as much as intuition, Libra. If you are moving through an unfamiliar area after dark, choose well-lit routes, remain aware of your surroundings, and make decisions based on ordinary safety, rather than treating caution as a prediction that something bad will happen. The same grounded attitude applies to advice. You do not need to trust every voice, but protecting yourself does not require assuming that everyone has hidden motives. Sometimes another person's experience can reveal an angle you had not considered. When someone offers guidance, pay attention to the quality of what they are saying, rather than assuming their arrival carries a predetermined meaning. Useful advice tends to give you more clarity and agency, not pressure you into surrendering your judgment. For students or anyone considering a different field of study, that distinction becomes especially valuable. Curiosity about another direction does not automatically mean abandoning everything you have already built. It may simply invite you to explore how a new interest could fit alongside existing academic and professional responsibilities. If you are considering such a shift, give the idea enough structure to become more than an escape from frustration. Look at what additional training would require, which commitments still matter, what skills might transfer, and whether the new direction reflects a lasting interest or a temporary desire for change. Libra's ability to compare alternatives can serve you well here, when comparison leads toward a decision rather than becoming an endless search for the one option with no disadvantages. A meaningful path does not have to be perfect before it is worth exploring. There is an old astrological principle worth keeping close. The stars may suggest tendencies, but they do not command your choices. Astrology can provide symbols through which you examine a situation, yet it cannot make a decision, guarantee success, or determine how another person will behave. Your actions, circumstances, preparation, boundaries, and willingness to learn remain part of every outcome. A reading becomes most useful when it helps you ask better questions rather than convincing you that the answer has already been written. Compatibility can be approached in the same spirit. Rather than assuming that one sign will automatically bring you harmony, consider what different personalities may draw out of you. Capricorn energy can symbolically emphasize commitment, structure, and the question of whether affection is supported by dependable action. For Libra, that can be revealing because charm and connection may feel very different when they are accompanied by consistency. Leo can bring another dynamic into focus: warmth, visibility, humor, and the courage to express affection without constantly measuring the room first. A connection carrying those qualities may encourage you to become more spontaneous, but it can also ask whether both people have enough space to be fully seen. The value is not that Libra and Leo are guaranteed to understand each other. It lies in noticing whether confidence and generosity are mutual rather than performed by one person for the benefit of the other. Gemini symbolism turns attention toward conversation, curiosity, and mental movement. As fellow air signs, Libra and Gemini can be associated with an easy exchange of ideas, yet even lively communication needs substance if it is going to support meaningful trust. Notice whether conversation helps you understand each other more clearly or simply keeps difficult subjects moving fast enough that neither person has to remain with them. Compatibility is ultimately lived through behavior, communication, values, and effort, not granted automatically by a zodiac pairing. And that returns you to the deeper thread running through this reading, Libra. Your instinct to understand different perspectives is valuable, but it does not require you to hand every perspective equal authority over your life. You can listen carefully to another person and still disagree. You can appreciate advice without following it, care about a relationship without abandoning your boundaries, and remain open to possibility without treating every sign or coincidence as an instruction. Use these reflections in that spirit. They are not meant to decide your path for you, and they cannot account for every circumstance, relationship, or experience shaping your individual story. Keep whatever gives you language for something you have genuinely been feeling. Examine it with your own judgment and release whatever does not fit. The most valuable insight is often not the one that tells you what will happen, but the one that helps you recognize what you are choosing and why. If this reading gave you something meaningful to reflect on, you can support it with a like and subscribe if you would like to continue being part of this community. Those simple gestures help these readings reach people who may also find something useful in them, and your support is sincerely appreciated. More importantly, thank you for giving yourself the space to listen with curiosity rather than surrendering your judgment. There is room here for symbolism and intuition, Libra, but there is also room for your own voice, and that is the voice worth continuing to recognize as everything else grows quieter.